Hey there, this is Jamison Dance from Soft Skills Engineering. This week we are bringing you a replay of episode 79 about story points and measuring productivity. I really enjoyed listening back to this one. Since recording it, I actually took a new job where I led a team from not really having any defined process to doing sprints and measuring story points and velocity. And it's been interesting reflecting back on my frustrations and trying to avoid them when implementing it this time around. I enjoyed listening to this again, and I hope you do as well. We'll be back with a new episode next week. See ya. It takes more than great UML diagrams to be a great software engineer. This is episode 79 of the Soft Skills Engineering Podcast. I'm your host, Jamison Dance.
I'm your host, Dave Smith.
Are UML diagrams a joke to you, Dave? Do you not understand how serious this is?
No, sir, they're not a joke.
You put a triangle where you should have put a diamond and people died.
Oh my gosh. Oh, UML.
I'm pretty sure I read that book and then promptly forgot all of it. And now my diagrams they're boxes with lines, and sometimes they have lines in the boxes too.
But no diamonds or arrows.
No.
Oh boy.
It's like abstract UML.
It's like an impressionist UML.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All of the boxes are made up of tiny little boxes.
Look, when you master the art form, you are then entitled to break the rules.
Yeah, that's true. You can play with it a little bit once you have mastered it, like I clearly have. This show is an advice show for software developers and other technical people about non-technical things, as you can clearly tell from the intro. And we have a question. Do you want to take it away, Dave?
Yeah, this comes from a listener named Jamison. Jamison, is this you?
It depends on whether it makes me look good or bad.
Okay. Well, I'll let you judge that after I read the question.
Okay.
It says, every team I've ever been on fails horribly at delivering the story points they commit to for each sprint. This feels really bad. How do we fix this?
That's gotta be old slacker Jamison, not me.
Not the one that you might want to hire.
No, that's old layabout Jamison. Everybody knows he just spends his time down at the dump drinking moonshine and not hitting his story points. Yeah, that is me.
This is the first time that we've openly asked ourselves a question.
Yeah. I would like to apologize to all the listeners whose questions we are not answering in order to answer my own question. But Dave and I just got started talking about this. Mm-hmm. And I really wanted to talk more about it on the air because I feel like while bad, it is not uncommon.
Yes.
Or maybe, I don't even know if while bad is the right thing to say here. It's definitely not uncommon, though.
Well, the part where you feel bad is bad.
Yeah, that is bad. I remember one. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, but you could fix the feel bad part by just changing your expectations a little bit and say, when we fail to meet our commitments for the sprint, that's when we should feel good. Problem solved.
I thought you would say by just not caring about not meeting your commitments for the sprint.
Oh, that's old junkyard Jamison talking.
If you said that, I would say, that's what I did. Yeah, I responded with nihilism, where story points... It's like... Did you ever watch Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
You know how he says, like, welcome to Whose Line Is It Anyway, where the points don't matter and everything's made up, or something like that?
Yes. You are the second person to quote that line to me this week.
About story points?
Yes. It literally was about story points. I was in, like, a sprint planning meeting a couple days ago, and someone said that on my team.
That's been in my head for years, and I'm sure I'm not the only... Well, I know I'm not the only person. There's at least one other person. I'm sure there are many more people, though,
yeah, but
feel that way.
The crazy thing is the timing. It just popped out for you and this other guy in the same week.
Maybe I am this other man also.
Oh, well, I didn't know. You do look alike. Okay. Anyway, sorry, you were saying points don't matter.
Yeah. Well, I guess there are a lot of ways you could deal with this. One way is to try and get better at estimation, and another way is to say, this is clearly a hoop we just jumped through that doesn't mean anything, and I'm just going to not care as much. And I've tried both ways. and the end result is the same so far.
Meaning you still don't deliver on your commitments, whether you care or not.
Yeah. And I still feel bad. Either I feel bad about checking out of this meeting every week, or I feel bad about failing to get better at estimation.
So if feeling bad is a given, what can you do to mitigate the rest of your broken life?
I don't know. I'm hoping you could tell me.
Jamison. Well, I'll quote my former CTO who said to me that he thinks that story points are the greatest invention in software estimation of all time.
He knows or believes something that I do not know or believe.
Well, did you ever have to estimate software by hour?
Yeah, actually, I did.
And did that go better or worse or the same as story points?
It went the same.
Which is every time you made an estimate, it was off by a factor of 10.
Yeah, it was way off, and then we just failed.
Oh, look, my completely wrong estimates are still off by a factor of 10 with different units.
Yeah, exactly. It was, and the decision to use hours instead of story points was that basically it all comes down to time anyways. So why don't we just cut out the middleman and then it didn't make it any better.
Cutting out the middleman usually works. I don't get it.
That was the end, man. You cut out the end. Oh no. Huh. Can you explain why your CTO felt this? Just disassociating estimates with time? That's the reason I usually hear.
Yeah, he basically said that some switch flips in a developer's mind when the developer is trying to determine how much time it would take to implement something, compared to just estimating the complexity of something. And by putting a point number on the complexity, you get more accurate time estimates when considered in aggregate. So basically, he said, as a team, everyone estimates their stories, they commit to a set of stories, they deliver, and then as you deliver, those story points can become a velocity which will predict future deliveries in aggregate for the team over time. Any single data point can have high variance, either a single person or a single sprint for the whole team, but that over time the velocity can serve as a useful predictor of total software delivery.
Yeah, that's the dream. And while you're saying that, I realized that one of the issues is that I've very rarely been on a team that will then calibrate how much they decide to do in the next sprint based on how many points they got done in the previous sprint, which is like the core of the approach.
I know.
But we
delivered 25 story points last sprint, and the 7 sprints before that. But I'm pretty sure we're going to do 80 this time.
But here's what we would like to get done. This work is all important, so we will do it in this sprint.
Right.
Instead of
however long it's actually going to take.
Yeah. That's a thing I think I could have done better on teams.
By being that negative person on the team who says, we can't do this, team.
Yeah, exactly.
See, that's the other thing. No one wants to be that.
Don't believe in yourselves.
You're all delusional. Let's just start with that. It's kind of a crappy way to open a statement.
I have gotten better at estimation in general, but not to the point where it's just like laser accurate about how long it'll take me to do something.
Mm-hmm.
I have a much better feel for for when something will just take me longer than it seems like it should take.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm still routinely off by a lot on how long it actually ends up taking me.
Yeah, and when you're off, it's not like, oh, I was 10% off. It's more like orders of magnitude, right?
Yeah. Like I just finished a thing that took twice as long as I thought it would take. And there were a ton of unknowns. It's a new platform, new technology all around. So it makes sense it would take longer.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know how much longer because I didn't know what working with these tools would be like.
Yeah. Have you ever gone to your product manager or team lead and said, we need to build a small proof of concept to gain full stack familiarity with the things that we're going to be touching before we can make an accurate estimate?
Yes, actually. Yeah, we did that. I would call it a medium scale proof of concept. And it took so it wasn't small scale. It was entirely UI focused, but the UI all worked. And it took like a month or two.
Ooh, that's a long time for a proof of concept.
Yeah. The point was we would get this proof of concept, we would show it to people, and it would work richly, so it'd be a lot easier to test with users.
Oh, okay.
And get feedback on without the overhead of building a backend to support all the tricky data flow issues that came into play.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of a waste of time, honestly.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, we learned the tools we were using, but we kind of already knew those. They weren't completely new to us in this project. And we ended up just like rebuilding everything, including the proof of concept stuff.
Oh, ouch. Okay. So it was a 1 month of investment. How many engineers?
It was like 3.
So basically a quarter of a year in terms of salary invested for some learning. But did you get valuable user feedback?
Well, yeah, we did. I think the dream was this would result in a more firmly defined set of features, because it was at the very, very early stages of a product. We just had no idea what it would look like or be. And we did this instead of starting to build the real thing right away to try and nail down some stuff. And we got information. Maybe it wasn't a complete failure, actually, now that I'm thinking back on it.
But for purposes of estimation, it wasn't that useful, is what you're saying.
No, it wasn't useful for estimation. I guess it was useful in that we were able to throw it away, and we would not have thrown away the real product if we had started building it right away. And we did learn a bunch of stuff from it that influenced how we built the real product.
Do you feel like you went down a safer, more long-term viable path that you maybe wouldn't have gone down from the beginning?
No,
okay.
honestly.
Total waste. Huge waste.
No, it was a It was not a big enough win for me to say, this is amazing and I want to, this is the right way to build software.
Okay.
But I don't know if it was a total failure.
Okay.
Anyways, so back to the question, Dave, have you seen this in your software experience?
Yeah, I would say almost every team, almost every sprint, if the team decides to commit to a set of deliverables in a 1, 2, or 3 week period, they almost all the time fall short of it. And isn't that crazy? In 2 or 3 weeks, as an industry, we can't deliver what we promise.
Well, we talked about goals a couple weeks ago. Do you ever make personal goals and then fail to achieve them? I wonder how much of this is aspirational instead of measurement. Not commitments to get things done, but things to motivate the team or the ideal version of what you would like to get done, I guess. I
think we do idealize it, and I think sometimes when we're estimating, we remember that one time that we were super productive and we cranked out a feature over the course of a day or two, and it was amazing and we felt great. And then we use that same personal velocity when we're considering story points and estimates for future estimation. So it's like, that one time I was able to be really focused and deliver something in 2 days. This feels about like that. But it turns out that 2-day thing was incredibly rare in your life. And that normally there are interruptions, there are meetings, and other things that get in the way of actually staying focused like that. So that tends to spread out to 4 or 5 days. And so I think we are aspirational in that one way, but I think you're thinking of it in a slightly different way.
Yeah. I don't know. Have you been on a team or seen a team that has regularly hit their story point commitments?
Yeah, only one team. And it was about
Can you tell the legend of this team?
I'm trying to think of a good intro.
Agile team.
Yeah. Back when all the fields were green. And before brown fields. No. So I worked on a team at my last company for about 6 months. I worked on it for about a year, but there was a good 6-month period where we nailed our commitments every sprint. We did 2-week sprints. We did story point estimation up front before each sprint, and we delivered like 100% of the story points committed. And then after I left that team and another lead took over, they continued that, and I think they did like 13 or 14 or more sprints in a row of meeting their commitments 100%. And there was a combination of factors there that I noticed that they did that I tried to get other teams to do, and then we had about 8 or 9 teams at the time, and the other teams really did not meet that same standard. And I would say there were a few things that set them apart. The first one was that they were pretty realistic in their estimates, meaning they looked at past velocity when they were considering how many points to take on for the upcoming sprint. Then in their daily stand-up, they would ask really important questions like, are any of the stories remaining that we've committed to at risk for my sprint, for this current sprint? And if so, the team would pounce on that. Instead of just saying, hey, were you busy yesterday? Good, you were? All right, next developer. Hey, were you busy yesterday? Good. Instead they would go story by story and say, Is this story going to make it in this sprint? Yes or no? Is this story going to make it in this sprint? Yes or no?
That's a great point. I have seen, and I've done, and I've seen other people do just defensive sprints or defensive stand-ups where your job is to like justify your existence.
Exactly. Like, were you busy enough to look good in stand-up?
I swear I worked real hard yesterday. No blockers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen people say those words with different words.
Yeah, I really dislike that kind of stand-up. To me, the team's goal, whether it's a set of stories or something else, should be the thing that's reporting status, and the developers are just the mouthpiece for that thing. They represent that thing. So it's like, and sometimes the person representing that thing is a QA team member or a product manager. Like, say the story's been coded up, and now it's in testing, the QA person should report on that story, and they should say whether it's at risk for the sprint deliverable or not. You know, and this team did a really good job of that, I felt like. And other teams, I never could really put my finger on why they weren't able to meet that same high standard, but they didn't. So that is the legend.
As the team changed and people moved off that team to other teams, did they bring that ability to other teams, or was it just something unique about that group of people?
That's a good question, because
did not get diffused.
Oh, I see. Like, did it remain with the team, or was it something about a person on that team or something?
Yeah. Like, did someone leave and then it stopped, or?
I need to follow up with them, because that was I left that company about a year ago, and at the time they were still cranking along. They've probably had some organizational changes since then. I should follow up and see.
Another question is, did that team end up impacting the product or the business a lot more than other teams?
See, and
or were they just more regular?
Yeah, that is the very interesting question, because like in the end, all the teams delivered a high value for the company, but this team was consistently predictable on a sprint boundary.
Yeah.
And so it kind of didn't matter, like because the other teams still delivered the value to customers that was needed. They built the stuff that was needed by the time it was needed, but within a single sprint, they were just utterly unable to get to that 100% mark every time.
Yeah.
But maybe it didn't matter in the end, right? Because like they did deliver stuff, and the company's doing great, you know?
Yeah.
So this is such an elusive subject, I think.
So it sounds like there might be some things you could do to help your sprints be more accurate. You know, you mentioned divorcing estimates from time, focusing your stand-ups on the status of the sprint, not on if you worked hard or not yesterday, being real good at your job.
I'm really good at my job. No blockers.
Yeah.
I should definitely not be fired.
Yeah. Oh man, I wonder how many stand-ups could be replaced with that. That's probably a good thing to look out for as a team lead, is when people are saying that, and then you get to figure out why they're saying it and what they should say instead, and help them figure that out. I mean, how much of it came down? There's so many ways you could do this, right? You could be very conservative in your estimates, and then you will.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if you commit to like one story point for our 8 developers for this sprint, you're going to get 100% every time. And this team I'm talking about, they didn't do that. They weren't complete, slime bags with the accounting. But they also didn't estimate it super high either. So it was like some of these these other teams that failed to meet their commitments also delivered a high number of points. But I never cross-referenced points, because every team had a slightly different calibration. So it was kind of apples and oranges to compare them like that.
Yeah, you don't want to get into like promoting people based on how many points their team gets done.
No, we'll talk about that in our next question. Teaser.
Oh, that is true. Foreshadowing. It sounds like you're almost saying, yes, they were good at this thing, but you don't know that it affected their productivity as a whole.
Yeah. But to answer your specific question I always feel bad because my teams never deliver their fully committed story points in a sprint. This team figured that out.
But what you also said is that's the only team. So what I should really say is, hey team, it doesn't matter. No one does this. So don't worry about it.
Yeah, and we actually, so one of the teams, we changed their approach, and we said, rather than focusing on commitment, focus on velocity. And the question isn't, can you commit to and deliver all the points this sprint? The question is, how high can you push your velocity each sprint? And we completely changed that for them, and we did it as an experiment. And And once again, because these things are basically impossible to measure, I don't really know what outcome it had. But the team didn't feel bad about missing their commitments because they simply didn't have commitments. And instead they were just like, let's go big. Let's deliver as many points as we can this sprint.
Huh.
And when I say they didn't have commitments, that's not to say that they weren't committed to meeting certain business objectives. They just didn't have sprint boundary numbers that they had to target each sprint. You know, they still had big deliverables like, hey, we have this customer who needs this by a certain date. And they had to hit those targets. But on a given sprint, it was like, hey, maximize your velocity.
Man, software development is so tricky because this is all looking at how you build it through the framework of Agile, but people build stuff in a lot of different ways. and say you land on the perfect way to Agile software develop. Does that even mean that you'll build better products than people who just like YOLO and sit down and type for a whole week without?
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, I feel better.
Awesome. That was all we were really going for anyway.
Old layabout Jamison feels better.
You were right all along.
Yeah. Nothing matters. Just layabout, celebrate at the dump. Okay, Dave, I can tell you that we have answered this question.
And we have.
Fully, because I know deeply the mind of layabout Jamison. Should we move on to the next question?
Yes, we should. This one's for you to read.
Okay. This is from listener John. We asked people how to pronounce their names, and John said, pronounce it biblically. So I think I'll put some echo on this. John.
Maybe John the Beloved.
Yeah. Great show. First time listener, first time asker, big time fan. Do you have those foam hands? Foam fingers, and they have just our faces on them? That would be cool.
Oh, man, that would be so embarrassing.
That's what fans do, if I understand fans correctly.
You do.
I am wondering how productivity would actually be measured. How can we adjudicate with measurable results between the whippersnapper who wants to use Haskell and the pragmatic tech lead? Maybe this is getting into the hard side of soft skills, but talk of productivity always sounds so hand-wavy. Are we talking self-reported developer happiness surveys? Story point velocities? Dollars per developer hour? Is measuring such things even worth it? In any case, I want to hear what you have to think about the elusive P word. Thanks.
Thanks, John the Beloved.
Yeah.
Saint John? I don't know which one.
Saint John the Beloved, yeah. Keep adding. Every time we say John's name, we need to add more superlatives to it.
Great.
As they do in the Bible,
yeah,
right?
That's right.
I'm pretty sure.
Saint John, the epically beloved, awesome disciple.
My last job, it's funny he mentions Haskell and the pragmatic tech lead because that exact debate took place.
Awesome.
Should we use Haskell? The pragmatic tech lead was like, should we have a company? And we ended up not using Haskell, but
okay.
I always wonder, what would it be like
to actually fail?
No, plenty of people get stuff done with Haskell. They're called academics. I'm sorry, we've now offended dozens of people. This is an interesting question. And actually, productivity did come up in this debate because one of the strong arguments for Haskell is you spend less time debugging because the strong and powerful type system helps avoid a whole class of errors. And I believe that is the case and see it in my work. And I use some languages that have stronger type systems to spend less time debugging. But there's not really a great measurement of that. In fact, there's a great article. This is about static versus dynamic typing, not productivity in general, but it's a review article that looks at all these studies of productivity in static and dynamic languages, and it's basically a wash. There are an equal number of studies supporting either side and how either side will make you build better software faster, that it's hard to tell one way or the other.
There's an equal number of fake studies that tell you.
Yeah, not fake, but they're not usually the most rigorous because it's hard to measure, right?
Exactly.
Like, this is what the question asker is asking. If you set up people to build something in Ruby and Haskell, how do you figure out which one is more productive?
And that is the question we're trying to answer.
Yeah, we've recursed.
Well, should we just go back to the beginning of the question?
Yeah, so most dank St. John the Beloved. I have not been in companies where there's an explicit measure of productivity. It's always been a gut feel, which is bad and good for different reasons. But I've never seen it attempted in the wild. I know it has been a lot. Have you ever worked somewhere that has like explicit numerical measures of productivity of some kind? I mean, beyond sprint planning stuff.
Yeah,
that's not really. That doesn't seem quite the same, though.
None that are stated overtly.
Yeah,
but sometimes managers latch on to certain metrics here and there.
I have seen them used when people feel that there's a performance problem.
Right.
Then somebody will pull up source control and be like, "Oh, this person only made 4 commits in the past month," or something like that.
Yes, I've seen that.
But
as well.
I haven't seen them on a dashboard that's like, ask Chief Pilot Mostank St. John the Beloved closed 5 tickets and
Chief Pilot
Lowly Steve only closed 3. So
there was
up your game.
There was a company recently that their whole company model was you pay them a monthly fee, give them access to your Git repository, and they will generate reports for you about your people.
Yep. Yeah, I've seen that.
And
I've seen that product.
I tried a demo of it just to see what they were doing. And it was really interesting because they would identify like drops, like changes, like this person used to write a bunch of code and now they've suddenly stopped, things you might want to look into. But they also reported like, I think what a simple-minded manager would consider to be basically a top employee report. And I think that the real world of software development is just so much more complicated than that kind of metric just does not work. It falls apart in really important ways, and it will actually penalize some of your most valuable engineers. Yeah,
because it's wholly dependent on source control, which means it's only the code, which means it misses most of what we do as a job.
Exactly.
Which is thinking and talking and helping other people, and it takes a lot more than just writing code.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are people where you see on every team who are holding the team together, right? Like they're answering all these hard questions, they're connecting the dots for people, they're helping integrate stuff, but they're not necessarily cranking out code and bug fixes, and their work isn't necessarily reflected in Git or in your issue tracker. And yet they are like the glue, and if you take away the glue, the whole thing falls apart, right?
Yeah, and so there is a law called Goodhart's Law that states when the measure becomes the target, it ceases to be a good measure. I think that applies a lot to developer productivity because any metric you come up with will be gamed. If you do it as lines of code, people will write long verbose functions just so they look more productive. And they might not even do it deliberately. It just is a subtle influence in their behavior.
Yes.
And also,
in fact, let me just insert here. The corollary to that law is that just because it has become a target doesn't mean that your employees are bad for seeking that target. They might think that it's what you want them to do. So they're trying to be good employees and doing what you want by making longer function names or whatever, right? So
if you do number of issues closed, you suddenly get very granular issues. And if you incentivize people like the glue person you talked about, if they are disincentivized to answer questions, then they're not going to help the team as much, and they'll be doing things they're not as valuable in.
Exactly.
I said before we started recording that I think there's a strong case for nihilism here, where it's impossible to measure productivity and you can't do anything, which is unsatisfying because somehow you have to know, is this person doing a good job? Are they getting better? How can I help them get better? Will this person be a good hire? Like, judging productivity is something you kind of need to do on a team to promote, to fire, to hire. to just make the team work well. If we haven't figured out how to do it, what do you do?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mentioned earlier, it usually seems like a gut feel thing.
It does. And look, I'll tell you, when it comes down to measuring developer productivity, the best thing you can have is someone who is super connected to the people to be reporting on that. Now, the problem with this is it doesn't scale up, so it's very hard to compare across orgs or across teams even. But when you're asking someone like, who are the most productive developers on your team, the people closest to the action, the manager or lead of that team, their job is to know this information, and they'll gather it from lots of data points. Sometimes it is something that could be represented as a metric, like this person just gets a lot of work done. But sometimes there's caveats there, like, but the code they produce has a lot of bugs. You know?
Yeah.
And so that is the true story of developer productivity. You can't put a single number on it because it's actually a set of trade-offs. Like, this developer is fast at producing new features, but also has low-quality code that requires lots of follow-up. This other developer, does the opposite. Like, they produce features really slowly, but they always work the first time. And this developer is good at getting other developers to produce features more quickly. So it's like, why would you? There is no one number because it takes these multiple different kinds of people on a team to be successful.
Yeah, I'm thinking back through all the people that I work with, and I feel like there are like one or two cases where I think of a person and think, yes, somehow they just were way more productive than other developers I've worked with. But they are pretty rare. And the rest of them that were talented developers are, like you said, they have very different strengths and weaknesses and complement each other in different ways. Yeah,
exactly. That's been my experience too.
The danger with that is it's subject to all the biases that people are subject to. I mean, the danger with measures is they're easy to game. They influence people's behavior in ways you might not intend, but brains do that already in different ways. I think if you believe that productivity is hard to measure and you go by what you know about people, then you owe it to yourself to work hard to make sure you're not being unfairly biased.
So I have a little story about this because I was in a similar situation as St. John the Dank. And when I was right out of college, I was working at my first job, and my 1-year anniversary was coming up, and I knew that meant it was time for performance reviews. And I wanted to know, like, how can I show my boss that I'm doing a good job and that I deserve a big, fat, juicy raise? And so I went to my boss and I said, hey, didn't really mention that my 1-year review is coming up, but I'm sure he realized what I was doing. And I said, how do I demonstrate that I am contributing positively and doing a good job? And I said, look, if I was in sales, I would just show you all the sales I brought in. And it would be a single number that really reflects my entire contribution, and it would be easy. But as an engineer, like, I fix bugs, I participate in meetings, I do design reviews, I write code, I build features. It's very, very difficult to put a number on these things. And my manager talked to me for like an hour about this. Just talk. And at the end, I was like, wow, this is so great. He had all these good things to say. But I walked away from that meeting and I realized he has no idea. Because I tried to figure out what his thesis was, and I realized he doesn't know. He just kind of talked about all the different things. And I think in the end, that's how you measure productivity. Is it's actually a long discussion because there's so many facets to it in engineering, and trying to find one way to measure productivity is just kind of a fool's errand.
But Chief Pilot Most Dank St. John the Beloved is not a fool.
No, he knows what's
Listen
up.
to all his titles.
I know.
Yeah.
PhD on the end there.
Yeah. If you work in an environment that has these numerical measures of productivity, I think you just kind of need to acknowledge that they exist, and you might need to do some hoop jumping to look good on them, but that they are flawed, and doing your job well will not necessarily make you look good on those numbers, and doing good on those numbers will not necessarily make you do your job well. If you are trying to evaluate people, I think we had a lot to say about how you look at people's worth to the team and to the business. And if you're looking for good titles, we definitely had a lot to say. Oh
yeah, we're all over that. I think we should come up with a formula that you can use that's like super simplistic but awesome. Like it's like points. It's almost like story points, but it's like developer value points. And I think
here it is. No, I got it. It's
okay.
the number of mechanical keyboards you own. It's disassociated from time.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Therefore, it must be good.
I guess technically not, because as you get older, probably the number trends upwards. Unless you get into minimalism, and then maybe you only have one. I think it's no worse than many other measures of developer productivity. How about that? Okay, if you are trying to measure developer productivity, it has to be better than the number of mechanical keyboards that they own.
That's the baseline.
That's the baseline. Yeah, that's the baseline productivity measure, and you need to beat that.
It's a pretty low bar, but maybe not.
I don't know. I don't know that it's that low. I have a lot of mechanical keyboards, Dave. And I'm pretty productive.
That's
all
true.
Right.
You are.
Have we answered the question?
Absolutely.
All right. Best of luck to you, sir. I don't want to say all the titles again. All right. What can people do if they would like their own? Wait. Oh no! I forgot. I was going to say this. We need to come up with a measure of productivity for ourselves in the show.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I mean, we could do number of questions answered.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually 2.
Number of titles invented.
Okay, yeah. I mean, just number of times we say words. Measure the number of words we say.
Word count.
That's hard to measure, though.
Yeah.
Someone has to count them.
Yeah, that sounds expensive. Duration.
Okay.
Really
that's very easy to measure, which means it's a very good measure of productivity.
That's right.
Because it's low effort to create.
Number of times you made me spew out my water because I was laughing.
Number of times I edit out either of us saying Only I know that one, though.
Yeah. Do you actually do that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah, I do.
Do I say a lot?
No.
Oh.
You do not.
Oh, it's you.
Somebody else says a lot.
You are killing our productivity score, Jamison.
No, I think I was going to say that. Well, I guess that would be, it's like an inverse measure of productivity. Mm-hmm. How long it takes me to edit the podcast. That could be a measure.
All right. I think we've got a winning metric here.
Yes, we'll combine all those into a number, and we'll report it to you next week.
And the units on that number will be what?
Unitless.
Oh, it's a dimensionless ratio.
Yeah, it's... Yeah.
But the denominator is number of cumulative mechanical keyboards between the two of us.
Okay, sure. Yeah. All right, we'll do it. Next week we'll report. What can people do if they would like their questions to be featured next week or other weeks?
You can go to softskills.audio and click the top right of the page where it says Ask a Question. Fill out the form and enter whatever information you like. You can give us your name or leave it off. You could be anonymous or give us all your credit cards and social security numbers if you want to. Which doesn't matter because Equifax already gave those out.
That's a little topical humor for you. Equifax did not give out good ratings on iTunes, though, to our podcast. So if you would like to do something they have not done, please do that.
Yes.
Share it with your friends. We like it when people listen to our show. I think we're done. Are we done?
I think so. The metrics seem to suggest that we're finished.
It just ticked over to 7. So we'll catch you next week.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.